How can God have always existed, having never begun, just going back infinitely into eternity? I don't know, you can't get your mind around that. How can God hear and answer every prayer at every moment? How can he sort one out from another? How can God know our choices before we make them and yet still allow us to have free will? How can God permit suffering in the world and yet still work for good in the world? There are a lot of questions about God that we cannot definitively answer. I can suggest answers to all of these questions, but can I definitively answer them? No. Really, when it comes to asking these kinds of questions about God, we just have to shrug our shoulders and praise God for his greatness. The Christian author Francis Chan said, "Isn't it a comfort to worship a God we can't exaggerate? God is beyond exaggeration, and God is also beyond our full understanding." And that truth actually should comfort us. Well, let's look at some reasons why. First of all, if we could understand God, he wouldn't be the true God. Let's look at the words of Isaiah as God speaks through Isaiah and talks about himself. In Isaiah 55, beginning in verse 8, Isaiah says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways greater than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." There are certain things that we just don't have the computer to process. Try teaching your dog algebra. He may be a good dog, but he doesn't have a hook to hang it on. And that's how it is when it comes to understanding God. We don't have the hooks to hang his nature on. If our brains, it's been said that if our brains were simple enough to understand, we'd be too simple to understand them. And if God could simplistically fit into our brains, if he could fit within our understanding, he would not be the real God. He'd be the product of somebody's imagination. Secondly, why is it a good thing that God is too big for us to grasp? Secondly, just as God is bigger than our understanding, he's likewise bigger than our problems. The prophet Jeremiah, let's look at what the prophet Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 32, verse 17. Jeremiah 32, verse 17, Jeremiah says, "Ah, Lord God, it is you who have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and your outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." There's plenty that's too hard for me. There's nothing that is too hard for God. And in this world, according to the words of Jesus, in this world we will have trouble. John 16, verse 33, "But we can take heart because our Lord has overcome the world." He is bigger than our problems. Now, there are a lot of really powerful people in the world who could come in right now and they could fix a lot of issues that I have that I can't do anything about myself. But you know what? They don't have a reason to. They don't really care about my situation one way or the other. I'm immaterial to them. But that's not the case with God. And the third thing that's really great about our big, big God, God's love is also beyond understanding. As a matter of fact, Paul says in Ephesians 3:19 that the love of God surpasses knowledge. Let's look at God's love as Paul describes it in the book of Romans. Romans chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. Here's how Paul puts it. He says, not only Romans chapter 5, verses 7 and 8. Says, "For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die." Somebody done right by you and been very kind to you, you might be motivated to lay your life down for that person. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, while we were still hurting him through our actions, doing things he hates, Christ died for us. Now, put your mind around that. That's love that is beyond Who of us would die for our worst enemies? And yet God sent his son to the cross to die for us while we were his enemies. So not only is God all powerful, but he cares about us more than we can imagine. And that's why Peter says in 1 Peter 5 verse 7 that that's why he says we can cast all our anxieties on him because he cares for us. So let's take comfort, let's find joy in our awesome God. Even during turbulent times like this, we can take comfort and joy in his amazing power and in his amazing love that nothing can separate us from.